You. Okay, so I emailed Rob Walker about the complexity of the renin-angiotensin pathway. If he doesn't know, or if he can't figure it out, I'm not sure who could. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk about the pancreas before I totally lose people and its associated pathologies. Pancreas is totally cool. It's behind me. That's my screen behind me. It's cool because it is part of the endocrine system and is also part of the digestive system and acts like an exocrine gland. So it has endocrine functionality and has exocrine functionality. It is posterior to the stomach, and you can see it tucked away back here. The structures that are associated with the endocrine system are what are known as the islets of Langerhans, or the pancreatic islets. Islets of Langerhans are generally the term that's, or the name that's more commonly used. And if you take a look behind me, you can see two of them. They have red dots on them to mark them. Each of those is an islet of Langerhans. Islets of Langerhans will produce several hormones, which include insulin and glucagon. Everybody has heard of insulin. Hopefully, many of you have heard of glucagon. This is the third physiological slide you need to know, and it looks totally different from the other two. When you look at the pancreas, you see a swath of tissue, and then you see these little islands of lighter colored tissue, and those are the islets of Langerhans. So think about what the pituitary looks like. Two swaths of totally different tissue on either side of the slide. Thyroid, fish ponds. Pancreas, swath of tissue with these lighter colored islets. And they're going to be lighter colored because they're not picking up the stain. Insulin is the hormone that I would say 99% of the American population knows. It is going to be produced by the beta cells within those islets. And yes, you need to know that beta cells produce this. When your blood glucose levels increase, you will secrete insulin. So after you eat a meal, you're going to secrete insulin. Its job is to decrease blood glucose levels. And it is going to pull glucose out of the blood into cells. It will also increase production of glycogen. And you know the glycogen is stored in the liver and skeletal muscles, mostly in the liver, 6 seconds worth of skeletal muscle contraction in the skeletal muscles. It will also cause the uptake of more amino acids into cells. So it's going to increase protein synthesis, because those are the building blocks of proteins. And it'll tell adipose tissue to synthesize and store more fat if it needs to. So just like with calcitonin, decreased blood glucose levels, PTH, increased blood glucose levels. When you are asked about insulin and its friend glucagon, you need to tell me what it does, and it's more than controlled blood glucose or blood sugar levels, because that doesn't tell me anything. You need to tell me what they do and how. So glucagon is going to be produced by the alpha cells. And how do you remember that it's the alpha cells? Conveniently, glucagon has an A in it. It will be secreted if you have decreasing blood glucose levels. So if you're fasting, right? Or if you, even if you have a long period in between meals. It's going to increase blood glucose levels because it'll trigger the breakdown of glycogen through glycogenolysis, and it will also trigger gluconeogenesis, which is the formation of new glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. The islets of Langerhans also have delta cells, which will produce somatostatin. In this case, somatostatin is going to inhibit the secretion of both glucagon and insulin. So it's going to help balance. It's going to be like a way to balance blood glucose levels because it's going to control secretion of both of those hormones. I'm sure you've all heard about diabetes mellitus, and it means increased honey urine because the way that they used to diagnose this was to taste the urine, and if it tasted sweet, you were excreting a lot of glucose in your urine. You need to know these symptoms, and it's not just for this class. You need to know these symptoms forever, because I guarantee you 100% probability you will be dealing with patients. I don't care what aspect of nursing you go into, you will be dealing with patients who have diabetes. What's polydipsia?
You're super thirsty.
Yep. What's polyuria?
Increased urination.
You're micturating like crazy. Polyphagia?
Increased hunger.
Yes. So basically, you feel like you're dehydrated and you need to drink. But wait, polyphagia, why would you want to eat more? Why don't you want to just drink more? Why do you want to eat more too?
Do you want to eat more because you're not bringing glucose into your cells properly?
In part, and the other part is because you are so desperate, your body is so desperate to get fluid into it that you want to eat because there is fluid in food. Here's a total aside. There are times where you think, oh, I'm hungry. And it's not that you're hungry, it's actually that you're thirsty. The normal metabolism, normal person, no diabetes. You're really hungry, you want to eat. It's not that you're hungry, it's that you're thirsty because your body is so desperate to get fluid into it. So okay, I'm not getting fluid, so let's go for food because there's fluid in food. Glycosuria, what's that?
Glucose in your urine.
Very nice, good job. Dehydration, weight loss, ketonuria, ketones in the urine, acidosis, kidney damage, cardiovascular implications, visual impairment, diabetic coma, potentially death. So we have several different types, two different types of diabetes mellitus. And one is insulin dependent. It used to be known as juvenile onset or type 1. It's an autoimmune disease and your beta cells have been destroyed or are being destroyed or don't function correctly because of autoimmunity. No beta cells or decreased beta cells, decreased production of insulin. Glucose stays in your urine, you have all of those symptoms. This is classically what is known as your brittle diabetic, and these can be controlled by insulin, right? You're going to need insulin shots or an insulin pump. Non-insulin dependent, diabetes is also known as adult onset or type 2 diabetes. Adult onset is no longer the appropriate term because many children are ending up with type 2 diabetes because of lifestyle. It is caused by a lack of receptors on your cells, or their cells lose the ability to uptake glucose. The best way to control this is through diet and exercise. Best way to control this is through diet and exercise. And that is fair game for a test because, hey, best way to control non-insulin dependent diabetes through diet and exercise. So know it. You have plenty of insulin, but the insulin isn't working because your receptors aren't working. So you end up with all of those symptoms of diabetes. Watch these links. These are required links. There are ways through specific dietary regimes that you can actually reverse type 2 diabetes. I've actually been working with a couple of people to do that recently. These are the symptoms. I've already seen this. You can end up going blind. There are often no early warning signs. You just end up with glaucoma or diabetic retinopathy or cataract. So be careful. This shows you more information about diabetes. And I'm going to, I think that's it on that. Yeah, this shows you the prevalence. And this is from, this is estimated for 2005, and this is older. This is 5 or 6 years old at least. But it's diabetes is an epidemic. It is an epidemic. And I'm going to tell you at least one, possibly two stories of my own personal, related to me, in my sphere, I'll say, stories from people in my sphere. My high school friend, BFF, was a farmer. Her father was a farmer. And he loved being out of doors more than anything. Loved it. He loved everything about farming. And he had type 2, he had non-insulin dependent diabetes, and he didn't take care of himself. And he ended up with an ulcer, decubitus ulcer, which didn't heal, and he didn't take care of himself, and he didn't take care of the ulcer, which got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time he decided he needed help, he had to have his leg amputated. You would have thought that that would have helped him wake up and take his condition more seriously, but it didn't. And he ended up with another decubitus ulcer on his other foot, and he ended up having to have that leg amputated. So this man who loves being outside and loved everything about farming more than anything else in the whole wide world is now stuck in a wheelchair and has severe cardiovascular problems and is going blind because he didn't take care of himself. The other story actually is close to me because I was involved in it. My around the corner, down the road neighbor's husband, a good friend of mine, had type 2 diabetes, and he didn't take care of himself. And, there are only so many times you can tell someone politely and professionally that you're a knucklehead and you need to take care of yourself because you can have terrible things happen to you. And he, blew me off. I tried 3 times and he blew me off. He's like, okay, three strikes, you're out. A little tiny bit about diet and exercise and helping people maintain their health, even though they have non-insulin dependent diabetes, because I do nutritional counseling for a living. So I know a little bit about that. He blew me off. And started to have cardiovascular problems. And we live in a fairly quiet, not very heavily trafficked area. And he was walking his dog, came home at lunch to walk his dog. And he was walking his dog down an even quieter road. And because of cardiovascular issues, he fainted and he smashed down. He was a big guy. He was like 6'2" or 6'3". He fell down so hard on the pavement that he shattered his mandible and his maxilla. So he had to have his jaw wired shut. And It was just coming off, and I get this call. The phone rings at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that is never good. When the phone rings at 2 o'clock in the morning, that is never good. 1:30, 2 o'clock. And it's my friend, his wife, calling me and saying, Tom, stop breathing. Do you know CPR? So I run out of the house and I speed over there. And by the time I get there, he's dead. And I know he is dead. And I am doing CPR on a dead guy. And I know he is dead, but I'm doing CPR until the EMTs come. So the EMTs come and they, load him up and they're doing CPR and they're doing whatever they can to revive him. And I drive my friend to the hospital. So we drove my friend to the hospital because she's in no state to be driving herself. So we're behind the ambulance and they turn off the lights. The rotating lights, they turn them off. And she said, oh my God, they turned off the lights. What does that mean? And I know what that means. Well, you know what that means. But I don't want to be the person responsible for saying your husband is dead. I don't want that responsibility. I don't. So we get to the hospital, and sure enough, they were unable to revive him. He had died. He was officially, they said he was dead in the ambulance. And it's all because he didn't take care of himself. If you have an IBBM, or if you are responsible for someone who has this, please, 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 please take it seriously. Because it can be controlled, especially in the early stages through diet and exercise. The issue with the fact you don't take care of yourself is this. You stop. Type 2 diabetes can morph into type 1, and you can end up needing to take insulin forever. And once you start getting the symptomatology, once you start having peripheral neuropathies, once you start getting decubitus ulcers, once you start losing your eyesight, once you start having cardiovascular issues, many, if not all of those, are irreversible. And it just is so painful to me that people think that they are invulnerable and they're impervious and they're immune to any of the problems that will happen and are associated with these diseases, particularly when you can manage it. You can manage type 2 diabetes through diet and exercise. I'll get off my soapbox now. Okay, so let's do a quick, we'll go back and we'll check the go over the other glands that I haven't, but since we're here, okay, what gland is this?
Thyroid?
It is. This structure is a
Follicle.
thyroid follicle. Say thyroid follicle. What's in the thyroid follicle?
Thyroid globulin.
It's actually colloid. It's what's known as a colloid, and a colloid. Anybody know what a colloid is? A colloid, spit it out. A colloid is a solution in which particles are held in suspension. So when you're talking about things like laundry detergent or shampoo, you're using colloids. So this is a colloid, and it is thyroglobulin that is holding T3, T4 in suspension. And can anybody tell me what function of T3, T4 are?
Do they regulate the glucose metabolism?
Bingo. Good job. Okay. Sheesh. So it's a little bigger. What do we have here? More gland.
Pituitary.
Isn't this easy? Does that look anything like the fish ponds? It does not. See if you can look closely to see which one looks a little bit stringier, a little bit more fibery, and which one looks a little bit more glandular. Which one? This would be the
Posterior.
It is. It's posterior pituitary, because if you look really closely, you can sort of see wavy, stringy things. And this is the anterior pituitary. Make sure you say anterior, posterior, pituitary, add that pituitary, because anterior what? Posterior what? And then last but not least, you only have one left. You have the pancreas. How do you tell? You see the swat the tissue and you have these little island-like things there, which are going to be the islets of Langerhans. Is that helpful? Everybody understand those? Pretty good? Good. Let's pop back up here. Move it off. Talk about aldosterone. Okay, thymus. We're going to be talking about the thymus in the immune system. One of my all-time favorite systems, but I love them all. It's within the mediastinum, the mediastinum, posterior to the sternum, and it is larger throughout childhood because you need to build up your immune system. Okay, it starts to shrink, not a lot, just a little. In the onset of puberty, they used to think it shrunk more, but it's generally because they were looking at desiccated thymuses in cadavers, which there's not a lot that isn't desiccated in a really old person. It is part of the endocrine system because it produces a hormone which is known as thymosin, which is associated with production and development, maturation of T lymphocytes. It is critical to the immune system because of those T lymphocytes, those T cells. Pineal gland, we talked a little tiny bit about the pineal gland in 131 in the nervous system because it is attached to the thalamus. This is the guy that's going to produce melatonin, which is associated with sleep-wake patterns. It is also going to help control circadian rhythms, which is basically how do you respond to shifting amounts of light and dark as the seasons change. This will impact moods and emotions, and in fact, is associated with seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, S-A-D. It is a real condition. There are a number of people that I know who suffer significantly from SAD. I have a little bit of it. The decreasing amounts of daylight during the wintertime can really affect people's emotions and send people into pretty severe depression, depending on how intensely you react to this. So 50% of people who have this say that depression symptoms are why they sought help, and that's in younger people. So yeah, 60 to 80% of these cases are treatable either through prescription of melatonin. They do have full spectrum light bulbs that you can add, which have made a huge difference for me. So there are different ways to manage it. Make sure you're getting exercise, make sure you're getting out as much as possible and being exposed to daylight, or get full spectrum light bulbs, etc. The ovaries, of course, are going to produce estrogen. So the ovarian follicle and the ovum, therefore the ovum, are going to mature each month because of the influence of FSH. That developing follicle is going to secrete estrogen, and you need estrogen because you need, as you grow, you're going to develop those secondary sexual characteristics if you're a female. It helps estrogen helps maintain those characteristics through life. It's going to target your hair follicles in your axillary and inguinal areas. It will target the development of mammary glands, and it will also target the development of adipose and Thibs high luteal region. And luteinizing hormone, you know about, it's going to trigger the rupture of the mature follicle, i.e. it's going to trigger ovulation. That follicle will become the corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum will secrete progesterone. And that's going to be super important because it'll prepare the uterine lining for implantation. And we'll talk more about these when we get to the reproductive system. The testes are going to be targeted by FSH in males. They will cause production of sperm. LH will cause the production of testosterone, not only at puberty, but throughout life. And you need testosterone because you are developing those secondary sexual characteristics, which will include growth of hair and facial, axillary, and inguinal regions, as well as development or increased size of muscle and bones, as it'll also target the vocal cords in your larynx and even the male's voice. And we talked about the pancreas. All right, so what do you need me to go over? We have a little bit of time left. Or are you all on the, can't take any more, my head is exploding, there's so much information in this, my head is gonna pop mode?
I have a question. Can you live without your, like, without any one of these glands? Or do you need all of them in order to sustain life?
So it's interesting that you asked that, because a woman that I know had thyroid cancer, and actually a man that I know had thyroid cancer and had his thyroid removed. So there are some where you can get, you can actually take the hormones that you need, and there are others that you cannot. For example, you need your pancreas. And it's not only because you need your pancreas for your endocrine function, you need your pancreas because it is a super important organ of the GI tract. It's going to have multiple functions in the GI tract. I'm assuming off the top of my head, you could live without your pineal gland, because you can certainly take melatonin and control your circadian rhythms and your sleep-wake cycles in other fashions. And that's also why we have some redundancy in the nervous system for controlling sleep-wake cycles. For example, the hypothalamus will help control sleep-wake cycles. You can do it, it's hard. And the case study, Chemical Eric, does talk a little bit about what happens with some of that. So yes and no, depending on what the structure is, what the organ is. Who else? What else?
We didn't really talk about the HPA axis. Do we need to know about that?
Do you need to know about that? Yes, and it's also sort of kind of outside the boundaries of this course. So it's not something that we typically talk about in the course. But I can certainly put something up on YouTube if you're interested in that. So as a nice to know, not a need to know, here's this. Why don't I do this? Give me a couple of paragraphs on the HPA axis. Make sure when you're doing your extra credit, make sure that you are citing your sources. And if you're pulling off the internet, all you have to do is cut and paste the URL. Don't cut and paste material in your own words, but make sure that you cite some sources. And I'll give you till, let's say, Thursday at 5 o'clock to do that. So thanks for that extra credit opportunity. I'm sure your classmates will thank you too.
Can you just say that in that assignment one more time?
Yes. HPA access. What is it? What does it do? Why is it important?
I have a question about the lab manual. You had said over email that we would talk about that in class, because there's one that's different from what's listed on Brightspace that we should purchase, or listed on the, sorry, the my info.
So I do have some lab materials that I developed from the Mariab information. And I post keys to those for the most part. They have keys for all of them. So I would work through those exercises, and that is practice. It's not required that you do that. It's not something that you're going to turn in. And do that as practice and then check the key. And if you have any questions, we can certainly review that. You do need a lab manual, preferably a Mariab lab manual, because we are going to be going over some of those exercises when we meet in person in lab. So make sure you have one. And you don't need to run out and buy a brand new one, the current edition. Get an older one because they're far less expensive. And really the only changes they have are from from addition to addition is that there might be some different questions, but they sure charge a lot for brand new manuals.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Could you go over one more time the location of the parathyroid gland and the
Sure.
hormones that they produce?
Parathyroid, sure. Let's take a look, see. Someplace in this area here. So they're there. And if you want to take another image, a few more images, let's look at. Yep. So this is going to be, you're looking on this guy, you're looking posterior to anterior on the thyroid, because these are nestled in the posterior dorsal aspect of the thyroid. So far, so good? Okay. The two hormones that you need to know when it comes to talking about controlling blood calcium levels are calcitonin and parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid glands produce parathyroid hormone. And parathyroid hormone, hello, so you can see it and hear it, hello, at the same time. Parathyroid hormone is going to increase blood calcium levels. Parathyroid hormone will increase blood calcium levels. So how does it do that? Because you need to be able to tell me how it does that. It's going to do three things, one of three things, or three things, each of three things. That's what I mean. The osteoclasts, remember those guys? Osteoclasts are the ones that are going to lyse bone. They're going to be told, lyse more bone. Because when they are lysing or breaking down bone, they are releasing calcium. Because you have calcium phosphate stored in bone, so they're going to be releasing calcium and phosphate. But the focus on this is calcium. At the same time, the osteoblasts, which need to take calcium out of the blood in order to build up bone matrix, they're going to be told, hey, take a little mini break, slow down, don't work so hard. Don't take as much calcium out of the blood. The kidneys will stop pulling calcium into the tubules. As soon as you get calcium in the tubules, it's going to be excreted out as urine. So they're going to be said, nah, we need more calcium in the bloodstream, so ignore it. And the small intestine is going to be told, hang on to more of the calcium that we're eating. Good to go on that? So that's all about parathyroid hormone, and that's the hormone that you need to know that is secreted by our friend the parathyroid glands. You also need to know about calcitonin, which is going to be produced and secreted by the C cells, which are also known as clear cells, which are also known as suprafollicular cells, which are also known as extrafollicular cells of the thyroid. So calcitonin is going to decrease blood calcium levels. And how does it do that? It's going to do the opposite of what PTH does. It's going to tell the osteoblasts, lay down more bone matrix. It's going to tell the osteoclasts, quit breaking down so much bone, quit lysing bone. It's going to tell the tubules of the kidneys, it's going to tell the kidneys, hey, pull more calcium out of the blood and secrete it out into urine, which will help reduce blood calcium levels. And I think we're here. It shows you that. Let me go full screen here. I can figure out how. Full screen. I'm not quite sure how. Oh, I know how. Duh. Hello. I'm here. There we go. So people who are chart oriented tend to like charts like this. So you have increased blood calcium levels going up, levels going up. thyroid will release calcitonin. Calcitonin will increase blood calcium or calcium deposition in bone, osteoblasts, and will reduce calcium. Actually, it'll trigger more calcium uptake in the kidneys. So I'm not sure what that, I'm going to change the slide then. When you talk about PTH, because you have falling blood calcium levels, parathyroid glands are going to increase the absorption of calcium. The kidneys will retain more calcium. That's what that is saying, actually. And the osteoclasts will be stimulated to lyse more bone. Better? What else you got for me?
Did you say that we were doing something with the heart in lab this week?
Monday, next Monday.
Next week. Okay. So just the endocrine stuff.
Today is endocrine. Wednesday is blood, hematology, blood cells, what they do, what they look like. We'll do a little review of this too.
And will we be meeting in person on Wednesday or online?
I will figure that out tomorrow and I'll send out information. I would like to be in person, but I don't want to be that person who spreads COVID. And I'm hoping I don't get it. Please don't get COVID. Anybody else?
For all of the pathologies that we've gone over, would it make sense for us to know like 3 or 5 of the symptoms, or like, are we expected to know all of them or just a couple?
Sort of 3 to 5-ish is good. And you should be able to tell me the difference between the 3 different types of diabetes. And another thing that I would do if I were you is I would go through all of the hormones and say, okay, what controls, what is going to be responsible for blood glucose regulation? What is going to be responsible for helping control blood pressure? Because those questions are fair game for the assessments. How's everybody doing? I saw that there were already a couple of submissions. Sneeze. Yeah, again. Excuse me. That should be good. And we're already several submissions on the chemical ERIC case study. Good for you. Get it over with. Those grades will be added to your lab practical grade because the online lab practical will be 10 questions, 1 point each. And then after I grade those, I will go over and look at the chemical ERIC stuff and add that to your lab practical. It will not be a separate column to help make bright space grading a little bit easier to understand. What else you got for me?
Sorry to keep talking. There was one question on the chemical ERIC case study that I just was confused about. It was what hormone was responsible for his like unpredictable shock response? Like when he got 3 stitches, he was like in excruciating pain, but when he hurt something more, it really didn't bother him. And I just wasn't sure what I should be looking for that one.
Do you have a study buddy?
Yes.
Have you talked to your study buddy about it?
Not yet.
See if you guys can come up and reach out to a couple of your other classmates and see if you can come up with an answer. And if we need to, we can address that on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
I can help you with that if you need me to as well, if you can't figure out the answer, because I've already turned it in.
help her walk through the information to get the answer. Don't just
Yeah.
get the answer.
I won't.
You rock, Miss Todd. What else? Who else? Or are you in the, where are you in the 0 to 10? Holy cow, this is so much information. 0, I can keep going for another 3 hours. 10 is I'm done. I got a 7, I got a 10. You good to go? Anything else? Otherwise, I'll cut you loose and I'll see you somewhere, somehow on Wednesday morning. All right? Okay, folks.
Thank you.
Stay cool. It's supposed to be hot today. And we'll